During this program, we will visit the Everglades. First, the geography and climate of this huge expanse of marshland. Then we'll meet its inhabitants, the plants, of course, and also the animals. The Florida Everglades are probably the most famous wetlands in the world. They're noted for the richness of their flora and fauna, and for their abiotic characteristics, such as their climate, geology, and hydrography. Flat marshland extending as far as the eye can see. That, in essence, is the landscape of the Florida Everglades. The plain of the Everglades extends over the southern half of Florida. It is located downstream from a rich hydrological system at the heart of which lies the huge Lake Okeechobee. It stands at least 4 meters above sea level and is inclined slightly southward. Indeed, the terrain slopes a few centimeters every kilometer down toward the Gulf of Mexico. Associated with a fairly impervious limestone soil, the profile is such that rainfall naturally flows seaward. The water from Lake Okeechobee, along with the rainfall, forms a broad, slowly flowing river through the Everglades. The course of this shallow river is, however, highly precarious. It is closely linked to the climate in that region. The Florida Peninsula lies in the warm waters of the Gulf Stream and is buffeted by the warm, moist winds that accompany them. Its subtropical climate is therefore much like that of the West Indies. The Everglades experiences only 2 seasons, dry and wet. The wet season begins in May and lasts until October. During this period, thunderstorms, torrential rains, and hurricanes are frequent. The wet season accounts for 80% of the region's annual rainfall, which averages 1.5 meters. By the end of the summer wet season, the vast grassy Everglades is completely covered by water. In November, the rains stop and the temperature drops considerably. During the dry season, the water evaporates and the marshes gradually become dry. The Everglades River dries up. The drought can sometimes be so severe that lightning can cause a fire. These fires, however, have their good sides. They eliminate undesirable tree species that hold up the water's slow flow to the south. They also make available minerals trapped in the dead vegetation. During the dry season, the aquatic animals find refuge in the few subsisting ponds. There they become easy prey for larger animals, birds, reptiles, and mammals in search of food. But fortunately, the summer rains follow the drought, flooding the swampland once again. The rainy season is salutary for the populations of marine animals decimated during the periods of drought. The reproduction cycles of Everglades wildlife are perfectly in sync with the fluctuations in water levels caused by the alternating floods and droughts. Today, the gentle flow of the River of Grass has been greatly perturbed. For the past 100 years, a major drainage program has been implemented in the northern part of the Everglades to provide land for agricultural and urban development. As part of the program, Okeechobee Lake was dammed. Approximately 2,250 kilometers of canals have been dug. Some run the waters off toward the Atlantic to prevent flooding. Others send the runoff to artificial reservoirs, designed to hold the overflow collected during the rainy season. sugarcane and vegetable crops now stand between the Everglades wetlands and Lake Okeechobee. And a gigantic man-made plumbing system controls the flow of water between Lake Okeechobee and the Gulf of Mexico. As a result, the water entering the Everglades often no longer coincides with the natural fluctuations of the seasons. Worse, it is being polluted by the fertilizers and pesticides used in farming. As a result of these alterations, the Everglades ecosystem as a whole has suffered. The flora is threatened by the invasion of exotic ornamental trees, which quickly colonize disturbed sites, choking the native trees out of existence. The populations of wading birds that nest in the Everglades have also dwindled. Over 90% of these waders have vanished since the turn of the century. The abnormal fluctuations in water levels destroy their natural habitat and disrupt their natural reproductive activities. The populations of fish inhabiting the Everglades estuary are also declining dramatically. One of the reasons for this is the increased salinity of the water, caused by the stemming of fresh water from Lake Okeechobee. Everglades National Park was created to preserve the flora and fauna of the region. The park only covers a fraction of the original marshland, but its designation as a national park ensures that these unique wetlands will remain untouched. Native Americans call the Everglades Paheoki, River of Grass. The Everglades are home to approximately 1,000 species of seed plants. There is also a profusion of more primitive plants such as ferns, mosses, and lichens. So, botanists, hikers, and photographers, welcome to Paheoki. The sameness of the scenic beauty of the Everglades can be deceiving. The Everglades is home to an extremely diversified flora. Discovering them all would require close scrutiny indeed, or pointing a camera on the marshland. The landscape that best describes the Everglades is wet prairie land, dotted with wooded islands. Over 100 varieties of herbaceous plants flourish in these open prairies, which, for the best part of each year, are inundated. First among them is sawgrass. Sawgrass is a grass-like marsh plant with long, stiff leaves that can grow to heights of over 3 meters. These leaves have 3 sharp, toothed edges. During the dry season, these toothed edges retain the dewdrops, which eventually run into the leaves' central groove before descending to the roots. In sawgrass prairies on slightly higher ground and spared the summer floods, small groves or hammocks flourish. A hammock is composed of a great variety of broad-leaved trees, most of which are West Indian origin. Among them, the gumbo limbo stands apart for its thin, curled, copper-colored bark. The gumbo limbo, like other tropical species, originally arrived in the Everglades region born on the air and water. Indeed, hurricanes and sea currents carry the seeds of these trees to the Florida coast. In some cases, the seeds may be deposited by birds. Although these small hammocks of trees often look like tropical jungles, they house some northern species as well. One is the oak, which frequently serves as a supporting structure for air plants called epiphytes. As a rule, epiphytes have no contact with the ground. While they grow upon the trunk or branches of other trees, they are not parasitic. They derive their sustenance solely from the sunlight the air, and rain. They only use the host tree as support. The most common epiphytic plants are bromeliads. Members of the pineapple family, bromeliads consist of long, hollow leaves in the shape of rosettes. At their base, these leaf rosettes come together to form a small cup that serves to collect rainwater. This little pool of water nourishes the plant during the dry season. It also saves the lives of many small animals. Legions of tiny insects, for instance, and certain species of frogs who take refuge and even reproduce in these tiny pools. Not far from the bromeliads, our camera focuses on the most irresistible of all epiphytes, the orchid. While considered an air plant, the Florida strangler fig is not as harmless to its host as the orchid and the bromeliad. As it grows, its roots descend the trunk of its host to eventually root in the ground. Its roots grip the host trunk so tightly that they literally strangle it to death. The strangler fig crowds its host out completely. Epiphytes also thrive in the cypress swamps that are also characteristic of the southern Florida landscape. The only evergreen tree to shed its needles in winter, the cypress stands straight and tall, buttressed at its base. Near the Everglades estuary, where fresh water and seawater meet, the field of sawgrass gives way to an entirely different kind of vegetation, mangroves. Mangroves are amphibian forests that occupy the littoral zones of tropical regions. As their name suggests, their most dominant feature is the mangrove tree, which provides some of the area's strangest scenery with its stilt-like arching roots. These tangles of arching roots serve a number of functions. They serve as respiratory organs, drawing from the air the oxygen lacking in the mud they grow in. They firmly elevate the tree trunk above the surface of the water. They retain all sorts of debris, leaves, sand, grass, and shellfish, borne by the sea. When decomposed, this debris constitutes a soil, which gives the tree greater stability. Mangrove trees therefore erect a solid barrier that can withstand the fury of hurricanes and the encroaching sea. As such, they provide a haven for numerous small marine animals. Mangrove trees are halophilic, which means they tolerate seawater. Thanks to this and their ingenious way of spreading their seeds, they add to the area's land mass. Mangrove seeds grow and germinate into plantlets while still on the parent tree. When ready to take root, the plantlets, shaped like the tip of a cigar, fall from the parent tree and travel long distances on water currents until finding ground suitable for growth. They can survive thus for a whole year. When they finally land on a sandbar, they root and straighten their small stems. As they grow, they create new islands. On the sea or in the middle of the plain, the Everglades offer a breathtaking, picture-perfect herbarium. The Everglades' appeal doesn't just reside in their scenic beauty. It lies also in the breathtaking ballets of more than 350 species of birds, and also perhaps in the menacing presence of the alligators and crocodiles that wallow in their swamps. An extraordinary variety of wildlife has taken up residence in the Everglades. From the mosquito to the alligator, the many various species coexist in perfect harmony. The geography and climate of the Everglades are the two main factors that contributed to bringing such a broad variety of species together. Indeed, because of the Florida Peninsula's attachment to the North American continent, many mammals entered the region from the north. In the Everglades, they settled in side by side with the tropical species. One such immigrant is the white-tailed deer, or Virginia deer. To see this mammal eagerly browsing on the sawgrass of the Everglades swamp, it is obvious that it has adapted to its tropical environment completely. Because of its extremely varied diet, the raccoon also had no problem adjusting to the Everglades. Omnivorous creatures, raccoons eat almost anything, including plants, fish, and small marine animals. The raccoon is not the only denizen of the Everglades to feast on aquatic animals. Numerous wading birds, including those belonging to the heron family, relish them as well. These large water birds are recognized by their tapered beaks and elongated necks, which they fold into an S shape when in flight. There are many species in the heron family. They differ in the color of their plumage, their beak and legs, and in their specific fishing techniques. The great blue heron, for example, stands almost motionless, waiting for its prey to pass by. The more dynamic great egret slowly stalks its prey in the shallow marshes. The anhinga, a close relative of the pelican, patrols its territory by swimming underwater. It has been nicknamed the snake bird because it often swims with its entire body submerged, and with only its small head and long neck visible, giving it a snake-like appearance. The anhinga is a skilled angler, but it is without the waterproof feathers common to most wading birds. After feeding dives when its wings are too wet to fly, the anhinga spreads them out in the sun to dry. While most wading birds fish in freshwater ponds, the roseate spoonbill prefers the brackish waters of mangrove forests. It feeds by moving its spoon-shaped bill in long sideways arcs through the water, collecting shrimp, small fish, and other nutrients. Gallinules have much shorter legs than wading birds, but are just as agile. They have long toes that enable them to go wherever they can find insects to feed on. Many insects spend the first stages of their life in the water. The larvae of many of these species, however, become a food source for small fishes, such as gambusia. Very common in the Everglades, gambusia are an attractive prey for larger fish, such as perch, and for wading birds and some mammals, like the raccoon. The consumers of gambusia are in turn consumed by the voracious Florida alligator. At the head of the food chain, the alligator is the monarch of the Everglades. While its prey can be impressive, the alligator is less voracious than it is thought. It only eats once or twice a week. It is said to be able to survive up to 6 months without eating. Like other reptiles, the alligator is a cold-blooded animal. Its body temperature varies according to the ambient temperature. That's why alligators spend a lot of time sunning themselves. It is to combat numbness. A hungry alligator is a merciless predator. Also, by digging holes in the mud to ensure its survival during the dry season, the alligator creates a haven for other species of smaller animals. Until recently, the alligator was not the sole monarch of the Everglades. Its close relative, the crocodile, also reigned supreme in the brackish waters of the mangrove swamps. The crocodile is now much rarer and endangered. In recent years, its habitat has deteriorated considerably. Other animal species, such as the manatee, are in a similar situation. In spite of its enormous size, the manatee is a completely harmless marine mammal. It is even somewhat vulnerable due to its sluggish movements. It moves moves its heavy, fish-like body using its front gills and wide, flattened tail fin. Manatees have been nicknamed sea cows because they feed on the sea vegetation in the coastal waters. Another species so threatened that it may soon become extinct is the Florida panther, also called cougar or puma. This large, magnificent cat leads a solitary life, traveling great distances to hunt and thus ensure its survival. Let's hope that better control of the factors endangering the Everglades ecosystem will be able to preserve all the species that still inhabit it. In all ecosystems, a force keeps watch. Harmony, ensuring a relentless, pitiless, natural cycle of life and death. If only man didn't abuse it.